Hey guys, how you going? My name's Adam, this is Ian, we're from Chisholm Institute. We're here today at AEG headquarters and we're here to talk about the operation and safe use of battery operated power tools. Over the last probably 50 years there's been a change of environment. We've gone from corded electric tools to the battery operated tools. I don't think there's a tradie in sight that wouldn't have some sort of battery operated tool in their kit. So we want to talk to you about how to be safe, how to use them correctly, but also how to not be complacent and take them for granted.
You're never going to see the saw on the swim statement. The saw, the drill, the impact driver, they're not a hazard. The hazard is not using them correctly. And we're going to go over a few points today about how to use them correctly and how to make sure it's safe.
The biggest thing we've found over the years is that people get comfortable with tools, they get very reliant on their tools, but they also take risks with their tools. The biggest thing we want to make sure is it doesn't matter whether you're in the trade for 5 minutes or 50 years, you understand that these are dangerous tools, dangerous bits of equipment, and if you don't look after them and treat them correctly, they can do some damage.
If I was going to use this saw for the first time, depending, like here I've got a magnificent example that's straight out of the box by the looks of things. If I was going to use this saw at school, I would take the 5 minutes to go over a sort of pre-operational safety check, make sure that the guard's working properly, that everything is where it should be, the saw itself looks like it's in good condition, and then I'd deem it good for me to go. My fingers are worth the 5 minutes it takes to make sure everything's good before we get going with it.
The thing with what Ian said about using the saw, it's not just necessarily at a trade school, it's also on site. The thing you have to be mindful of is that majority of tradies work on multiple sites, they work with multiple different people. Just because it's your tool or equipment doesn't mean that someone actually hasn't used it. Again, if you put it down for 5 minutes, go back, reuse it, make sure you check it. So many mistakes and accidents have happened where someone else has come along, altered the guard, altered the direction, or changed the saw or changed the drill, and you're not used to it. So again, it's always about continuously checking your equipment to make sure that it's ready to go.
Okay, one of the things that we need to consider when we're going to use the saw is protection for our eyes. Now, these make me look good, clearly.
Really?
I think so. But they're not designed as a safety. If something was to go through these, they'd shatter glass in the eye. So never can I use sunglasses as safety glasses. Next option. I can use tinted safety glasses, but only outside. Every building site in Australia bans the use of these inside. So my next option and my last option is clear safety glasses that comply with the Australian standards. These are designed for protection, quite a good pair. They fit nicely around to stop any dust and that getting in. So I'm going to use a pair of those.
There's hundreds of different types. There's face shields, there's glasses, there's goggles. You don't want to pick a standard set because they might not be operational for some dust work or they might not be used for some grinding work. So make sure the pair that you pick are useful for the job you're doing. Don't just assume that you can put any old set on and they'll be fine. You've probably all seen the old ads where someone gets shot in the eye because they weren't wearing glasses or something shattered. Make sure you pick the right set because it's going to be your eyesight that's going to be affected if you don't do the right thing.
Next thing I want to speak about is one of the hazards that happens at school. These little things tend to be one of the biggest hazards. If I'm wearing these and I'm blasting AC/DC into both ears, the chances of me being able to hear someone yell out stop or whatever hazard's coming, useless. Banned from our school. It's much safer to get one of these out and enjoy the sound. It still allows me to hear what's happening around. This is a far better safety option. Okay, now, moving on. Another couple of choices when it comes to hearing protection. If I'm working on a union site, or a big building I should say, I've got to wear a hard hat. If I wear a hard hat, I can get hard hat with hearing protection built into it. Don't get much choice, you have to wear a hard hat in those places. Next option, earmuffs. Now, the earmuffs are really good if I'm going to pick up and I do a couple of cuts and then I put the saw down and I go on to something else. But if I'm going to work all day in a really noisy environment, I go for this option. Just the little ear plugs that go into my ears. It certainly protects them, easy to use, it's not really hot. That's what I would recommend. And as far as school goes, if you forget them, you can buy them at the shop for like 50 cents. That's a good saver cost.
The thing you've got to be mindful of, especially with whether it's the hard hat with the earmuffs or the separate earmuffs or the earplugs, is that, again, like the safety glasses, you've got to pick the right one for the right job. Now, they're all decibel rated, which means depending on what you're doing all day, is you've got to pick the right one that's going to affect your hearing or minimise the noise. We don't want you working for long periods of time in a noisy environment. So easy option is to either not wear them, which most tradies do. They couldn't be bothered putting on earplugs or earmuffs or hearing protection, but it's your hearing. Again, once it's gone, it doesn't come back. Okay, so make sure you pick the right ones, make sure you're always using it safely, and make sure you're protecting yourself. When we're talking about using the tools and equipment and using them correctly, you've got to be very mindful of what it is you're actually using. If you're using a power saw to cut, rip, chop, saw timber, you've got to make sure your material is secure. So many times we've seen and heard of tradies that are holding on to bits of timber with one hand and cutting with one hand. You're putting yourself at risk. It might only be 3 or 5 or 10 seconds a job, but for the sake of fingers, and we've heard very recently there's some unfortunate tradies that have lost some digits because of the fact that they have not been careful and being a little bit blasé with their operations. Saws are very dangerous. Drills are still dangerous. If you don't secure your timber, how many times have we held the bit down, drilled it in? These things can do damage. We've got to make sure that we protect them and look after them. What we want to talk about and demonstrate just with any battery operated tool, but especially the AEG power saw, is that we want to make sure that everything works correctly. We've demonstrated earlier the guard, but there's a lot of other safety features. The saw won't actually kick in unless you actually got the battery in, but you've also got a safety switch on the top. Press the button, pull the trigger, it'll kick in. You've also got to check things like the base. Is the base secure? Adjustable, make sure that it's nice and tight underneath. I'll turn it around so you can see, nice and tight. Again, multitude of uses. You can adjust the angle of the saw. So you've got to make sure that every single part of the saw is safe. So not just pick the guard up, pull the trigger, yep, I'm away to go. Make sure that it's all secure and tight. The other thing you've got to check is the blade. Make sure that the blade is sharp. If you've got a dull blade, it's going to make it a lot harder to cut through any material that you're trying to cut through. Make sure you've got the right blade. Are you cutting through timber? Are you cutting through plastic? Are you cutting through foam? Depending on what it is, make sure it's the correct blade. Once you've got all that in place, you've got to be very aware of the way you stand. Again, like the drills, the saw has 2 handles, one at the front and one at the back. Too many times we've seen people put their hand on material and try and cut through with one hand. Secure your material, 2 hands on the saw, and cut through nice and gently. The biggest problem that we have is people start to use a power saw and it'll bind and it'll bite and it'll tense up, and what the saw is going to do, it's going to kick back and injure yourself. So make sure that it doesn't. If it does, you're in trouble. So you've got to make sure that you keep going forward. Utilising the saw, making sure that it's all safe and secure. The biggest thing about them, as we talked about it earlier, is that you actually can utilise the one battery in a multitude of tools. So we take it out of the drill, we stick it into the saw, and then we test the battery. You have a look at the back here. Most batteries now have actually got the life. So we've got a full battery charge there, ready to go. We make sure we pull the safety trigger down at the front, and then we pull the trigger underneath. And the saw goes. Again, making sure that the guard's not up when I pull the trigger, because it will create damage. And what happens, because the saw is working in a rotating motion, if I actually press the trigger, the saw will spin around and possibly hit me. So we make sure that the guard's down, your safety's on, you pull the trigger, and away you go.
Now, when I pick up the saw, and if I'm getting used to brushless technology, which is relatively new for me, if I feel that is a significantly different feel to the conventional, the old-fashioned brushed saws, but that's fine. That's how it's meant to be, and that works a treat. Okay? We make sure, as Adam pointed out earlier, we don't just check the base plate, we also check that the angle section is working properly, everything's in place, and that saw is nice and safe, ready to go.
One of the things that nearly every tradie has, and no matter what hardware store you go to or where you go, you can either buy yourself a kit, you can buy yourself one drill or you can buy the other. You can buy the impact driver, you can buy the driver drill. But 99% of the time, all tradies go out and they buy the two. Convenient, easy to use. What you've got to be very mindful of is the correct use of them. Again, they are a tool that can save you a hell of a lot of time and they can make you a lot of money if you look after them. If you're blasé, you're casual, you don't take precautions or you don't look after them and yourself, you're going to be in danger.
Absolutely. And we need to be mindful of the fact that we can pick this up and it will go. As soon there's no plugging it in, turning it on, this is going to go, providing the switch is in the right place. One of the things we see a lot with our apprentices, that they line up the screw and they put it at an angle and then it comes off into the fingers and that. It's really important with these to make sure that you line up and you're pushing it dead in line with what you're wanting to turn or what you're wanting to drill. You'll see them come up and they'll start wiggling around and breaking drill bits and all sorts of bits and pieces. We need to make sure we line up and hold it correctly.
Yep. One of the best inventions that's been around probably for the last few years is the impact driver. I reckon every tradie loves the impact driver because they don't have to worry about swapping bits, they don't have to worry about adjusting the torque, they don't have to worry about anything. These little babies are fantastic. However, they are dangerous, and if you don't use them correctly, they've got a lot of power and you can end up doing yourself some damage. So be really mindful of the power these things have, but also when you're using them, be mindful that you're not going to wreck or damage any of the material that you're using. Again, they don't have an adjustable torque. They just go and you keep pressing the button and they'll keep turning. They'll break heads off screws, they'll drill into timber and material like nobody's business. So be very mindful. But again, this is a fantastic tool. Make you a lot of money if you use it correctly.
One of the things that we wanted to cover too is making sure that you look after this and it ends up staying yours. One of the worst mistakes I ever made was I took my family into all buying the same one. And we got a set. My son, the plumber, the other one got all the same tool, and I thought that'd be great, we can share batteries.
How long did that last?
That was ridiculous. I found that now I end up with flat batteries or no batteries. They take them and we get them to engrave their license number into the battery, and that way, if it gets stolen, the Victoria Police will return it to the rightful owner. There's also another little problem that people can scratch it down, and that I like to put another mark, a significant little X or something in a spot that's out of the way that only I will see. Because like, if I was to spray, which you see a lot of people do, they just get their tools and give it a blast of pink. Well, I can put a blast of pink on anything and call it mine. But a license number and a personal identification spot, I can't do. Okay? It's really important that that happens. Make sure it comes back to you. Then back at the police station, when the guy that looks after all the bits and pieces, they can return it back to you.
Yep. One of the things we've found over the last few years is that there's, as we all know, is in the trade, there's a lot of tools being stolen from trailers, from utes, from cars, from job sites. It's really important that if you're going to use your tools and equipment, you know what they are. Label them, mark them. They can be returned if police find them. It doesn't hurt to also to record it so that you've got evidence. Keep your receipts, take pictures of all your tools and equipment to make sure that no matter what happens, worst case scenario, you can get it back. Or if you're smart enough, you can claim it back on your insurance.
Even at school, we now have them all numbered because some of our students like to swap our nice new batteries for their nice old batteries.
When you're using the standard drill here, it's really important if you're using any auger bits or Forstner bits or any spade bits. One-handed can be very, very dangerous. Nearly 95% of all drills come with a handle. It's very, very important that you actually use that handle. Again, it's about your safety. You make sure the handle's in, nice and secure, and you've got two hands on the tool at all times. The one thing you don't want to be doing is trying to drill through a nice thick bit of timber with a big auger bit or a Forstner bit and have the drill bite or kick or twist, because again, the power in these things is going to do a lot of damage to you, possibly to the timber or the material that you're actually using. So if they come with a handle and it's practical to use it, make sure you put it on and make sure you use it, because again, it's about your safety and it's about correct use of the tool as well.
The last thing, a golden rule in life that I'm going to share with you. If I'm at work, we're building something or whatever's going on, and the bricklayer says, look, let's have a barbecue this afternoon and we'll call it a day. The minute the cans come out of the esky, these tools are back in the car, never to be used again. Till the next job.